And welcome into the Tuesday edition. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you. Hope everybody's off to a wonderful start this morning. Joe Rexrode, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Carlos, but doing okay.
Well, maybe it's time for a horse and buggy. Time to get back to olden days out there where you.
Ask John Glennon. He's come out here to pick me up, and he thought everybody out here did use horse and buggy.
Well, there is that. There's that. Keyser, how we doing? What's going on?
Yeah, good morning. Joe, what's the story, man? Why do you not have a car?
We got a doctor's appointment, and we got a student council going to school like an hour early.
Oh.
So we have two different places that those two cars that we have need to be. And of course, we have another car that's in East Lansing. So
yes,
that's my story.
Joe stranded at home, not able to get out today. Take your at-home remedies for Rexrode on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. We got a lot to get to on the program today. Mike Wilson will be with us at 7 o'clock from the Knoxville News Sentinel. We'll get his thoughts on Tennessee's big win against Alabama and what this could now mean for the Vols. Looking ahead to the NCAA tournament, Bruce Feldman from The Athletic will be with us at 8:30. We'll get into the quarterbacks in the NFL draft and some other takeaways that he had from conversations at the NFL Combine as well. So that's coming up later in the program at 8:30. Looking forward to that. Taking your thoughts in the meantime, 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. So Joe Rexrode, we have almost made it to the busy part of the NFL offseason. We're seeing some moves that are already starting in terms of decisions that teams are making about the franchise tag. Today is the franchise tag deadline. It is at 3 o'clock Central Time today. And coming out last night, not that this at this point, Joe, I guess is a huge surprise, but Sam Darnold will not be tagged. Sam Darnold will be a free agent, and the Vikings apparently still hopeful to work out a deal of some kind with Sam Darnold, but they will not be placing the franchise tag on him. So Darnold is going to be a free agent unless there's a deal that he comes to very shortly with the Minnesota Vikings. Joe, your thoughts on that and what that now means for both Darnold and the quarterback market this offseason?
Well, what does it mean for like conversation and like innuendo about excitement? Other shows on this station is what I would like to know. My gosh, everybody just get some cold water, get an ice bath ready. But seriously, look, I think that it's a worthwhile pursuit for the Titans. I do. Not that I think Sam Darnold is going to be like a great quarterback, but I think that he definitely showed a lot last year, enough to get a starting crack at a place like this. And I'll be very interested to see what the market is for him. I think the Titans should absolutely be in on it, and I think that others will be. And then we'll see the different pros and cons that he sees in those situations. But again, I wouldn't use one on a quarterback in this draft. I don't think there's a quarterback in this draft that is worth the one, and I think that could be just another thing that sets you back. And I understand there's a growing sentiment for Cam Ward, and I understand it. But I think if the Titans could get Sam Darnold and then address all those other needs, I think that'd be the best case scenario for them. And especially, the best case is that, and then you're able to trade down to the Giants, still get one of those, to me, still get Travis Hunter potentially and get more picks. I mean, that's a kind of a dream offseason to me.
Well, I kind of look at this, and Joe, I just wonder if you're Minnesota, like the reporting out there is that he's not going to get franchise tagged, and yet Minnesota is going to try to continue to work out a deal with him. Well, those two things to me, Joe, like don't really add up all that much. Like, are you signing Darnold to a 3 or 4 year deal if you're Minnesota? I have my doubts about that with J.J. McCarthy waiting in the wings. And is Sam Darnold going to get anything less than like a 3-year deal on the open market. I have my doubts about that too. So it kind of feels like this is Minnesota's decision of saying without saying, hey, yeah, we'll attempt to quote unquote negotiate a deal with you if it's on our terms for like a year or two with an out after one and the finances are right. But I think if he gets to the open market, which he's going to at this point, I don't know why Minnesota would match that, what other teams could potentially offer for 3 or 4 years when they do have JJ McCarthy in the wing. So it kind of feels like the Minnesota part of this is over to me for Darnold.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, maybe some of this is partially doing him a solid, and it's kind of like go see, Now, what I would also say to him is just remember, you do 2 more years with us, and you may at some point JJ may get into the starting job, but you also played your best football by far with everything we have, including Kevin O'Connell, including Justin Jefferson. So you do another short thing with us, then you get another bite at the apple, and you prove yourself further. If you prove you're not a one-hit wonder, and then you can go out there, and by then JJ will be ready, and you'll be ready for a bigger payday. I mean, that's what I would say to him, that's, and that's, I mean, if I'm his agent, I would at least be thinking about, okay, just because it's working so well here right now, could that potentially set you up for a bigger payoff in 2 years? But I'm with you. I mean, I think that there's going to be teams right now that are willing to give him, like a 4-year deal. And, again, what really matters in NFL contracts is the guaranteed money number. And I'm sure probably more than what he's looking at with the Vikings. How much more? That's what's really interesting. Is there a huge deal for him out there? Is that what it would take for the Titans to get him? To the Titans, how much is the Titans tax just for being, a bad team, for being the worst team in the league? How much of a tax is there on that? It's going to be really interesting.
It is like, I don't know. Like, I guess I understand the idea of doing a player a solid. Sam Darnold came in, by all accounts, did all the right things, was well liked in that locker room, and played really well for the majority of the season until the last 2 games. So I understand the idea of like trying to do right by a guy. But I guess to me, like, if you're not ready for JJ McCarthy to be your quarterback, well, there's a pretty easy way to make sure that Sam Darnold's your quarterback next year. You franchise tag him, and there it is. He's your quarterback next year. This tells me, Joe, that I guess they're ready for JJ McCarthy to be their quarterback. Like I don't really have any other way to read this right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this absolutely is an endorsement of JJ McCarthy. Look, I mean, he did look really good in the preseason. I think Kevin O'Connell's got pretty good instincts when it comes to quarterbacks, and then the last 2 games were brutal for Darnold. I mean, there's no way around it. And he shrunk in those moments. I mean, it wasn't all on him, but he was bad. And so maybe, like internally, it's like, look, JJ, that knee's strong. And like he picks up where he left off. He was about to take Darnold's job in 6 weeks anyway. That's what I think they probably thought. Now, again, that was the mindset, I think, of the league last year, that Darnold's a placeholder.
Yes.
But then Darnold played the way he did, and that's where it's interesting. Is like, you can't deny that Darnold was excellent many, many weeks of last season.
No doubt. And now that we know that the tag's not coming for him, how does that influence the rest of the market? Like we talked yesterday about the Raiders and the Giants and where they have to pivot now that Stafford's back with the Rams. Like, is that a pivot in the draft and they make an aggressive push towards the top for a Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders? There's the Aaron Rodgers stuff that's going on and the connections being made to the Giants. Well, does the Darnold news affect that? And to your point, how do the Titans fit into this whole thing? Number one, is there interest that the Titans have in Sam Darnold? And number two, how much money are they willing to give him? Like, what's it going to cost? What kind of deal are you going to have to give up to go get Sam Darnold for him to look at your team, where you're at with your roster, and say, yeah, that's the place I want to be? I don't know what the answer to that is. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is in terms of how much the Titans would have to commit to him and for him to be willing to come here. I like, does the last 2 games that he had in Minnesota, it clearly is detrimental to him with the Vikings. How detrimental to him is that going to be with these other teams once he makes it to free agency?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, I mean, let's see. If you had a list of the primary suitors, for Darnold, I mean, that's like the Giants. I mean, anybody who's QB needy to me would have to be considered
Yeah, like I still keep wondering what in the world the Steelers are going to do. Yeah.
What are the Steelers doing? What are the Raiders doing? Of course, the Giants. Who are we forgetting? There's somebody.
Well,
I guess that's kind of the main
list. The
right?
main list. I mean, what's Cleveland going to do at quarterback? But they've already got a ton of money tied up there. So, there's people that think they may take one in the draft. We'll see. But I guess you could throw them in the list if you wanted to.
New Orleans.
It looks like Carr's coming
supposedly
back.
Carr's coming back. So, but yeah, they would have been. So, like if I'm Darnold, like if you're just from a team perspective, feeling good about a good situation, about winning. I mean, gosh, none of them. I mean, I guess that's it kind of makes sense that none of them are great situations. I mean, I guess I'd be probably most interested in the Steelers. Like there's a certain, standard there that they still don't go below. And they do kind of at times feel like if they had him playing the way he did last year, what would they have been? They would have been pretty good.
Been pretty good. And in that division where there's pretty darn good quarterback play, say for one team in Cleveland, that's what you got to have to compete in that division. Now, I would agree with you. That's probably the best spot in terms of quarterback needy teams. But maybe this, Joe, is just as simple as where can I go get the best deal? I mean, who's going to give me the best deal? Who's going to give me the most money where he cashes in really, on a huge payday for the first time in his career? I mean, it may just come down to that.
Yeah, especially if it's like so far beyond anybody else,
right?
I mean, I think again, I would take some tax off if I was going to the Steelers, personally, just because, I feel like they're certainly more ready to win than these other teams. But yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to make that commitment to him and can sell him on the vision, and look, in this league, again, you can sell. I mean, you can be like, hey, we're a year or two away from being really good. You put you in, all of a sudden we're a totally different team. You can sell that. Are the Titans a team that likes him enough to do that?
Sam Darnold not tagged by the Minnesota Vikings. Looks like he's going to make it to free agency. We'll take your thoughts on that. Should the Titans pursue Sam Darnold if he makes it to free agency? Plus, an interesting piece on the Titans yesterday going through the history of Callahan, Borgonzi, and Brinker and how that could relate to their draft strategy at number 1 overall. We'll get into all that coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get it all. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Sam Darnold not expected to be tagged in Minnesota, which would lead to his free agency if the Vikings are not able to come to some sort of other deal before free agency begins here. Ty on the text line saying, why would you not, if you're Minnesota, just tag and then trade it? Maybe you pick up like a third-round pick or something like that. I've always thought, Joe, that was probably the most likely route here, is that he was going to get tagged in Minnesota, and either he would begin next season as the starting quarterback, and then we'll see how it goes, or somebody would trade for him at that point. But clearly that is not the way that Minnesota is electing to go here. Again, like, this tells me that they are ready to hard launch the JJ McCarthy era here, but I guess this is just as simple sometimes, Joe, is doing right by your guy, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, then he gets to choose. I mean, look, players hate the tag. The NFLPA hates the tag. No, they anything the NFLPA hates, they negotiated.
Correct.
But, you know, there's way more teams that don't use it in a given year than do. It's kind of like seen as an act of desperation. I mean, if you do that, obviously now he doesn't get to pick where he goes. You know, you're confining him to what you get back. And I understand it's a business. These guys get cut all the time. But yeah, that stuff like that does happen, to let a guy just go out there as opposed to taking draft capital off him and restricting his choice. And I mean, because if it's not with that in mind, which again, now I don't know, I think this can be overrated, but people certainly say it. Agents say it. Players say it. You know, teams that do things like this get a bad reputation in free agency and things like that. I mean, people definitely said that about Washington and terrible ownership back when Kirk Cousins was their quarterback, and they didn't know they didn't know their ass from their elbow, and they tagged him 2 years in a row. You know, but I mean, that's the only thing I can really come up with. Because yeah, if I'm the Vikings and I'm really ready to move on from him, I'd love to get something back for it, and you could probably get a decent pick.
One thing I've learned this offseason as it relates to Titans fans and quarterback decisions, there's strong opinions on all sides of this, Joe. I mean, George on the YouTube chat says, go sign Sam Darnold. We're not taking a quarterback first overall. And the distinguished gentleman says, so you're going to pay a one-hit wonder $40 million per year? No thanks. Take the young quarterback on the rebuild and use the draft that way. It is all over the map in terms of Titans fans and what they want to do and how they view Sam Darnold, how they view Cam Ward, how they view all these guys.
Yeah, it turns into a great debate. And I think there's valid points on either side. I'm on the side of sign a Darnold, just because we've seen Sam Darnold play good football in the NFL. And as far as I know, none of these rookies coming out will ever do that. Maybe they all will. But as far as I know, none of them will. I think a lot of people love the unknown. The unknown is undefeated. We say it all the time. And I understand the idea of, you know, it's a rebuild. So I go grow with a quarterback. But again, my problem is when you have the number one pick, you have to get a great player. I don't think there's a great player at quarterback in this draft.
So to that point, Joe, it was an interesting piece that came out yesterday at SI.com that Albert Breer put together, going through the Titans, the evaluation process for the number one overall pick, which they currently hold, and the history of some of the decision makers in their organization, and trying to determine if that's going to give you a clue as to how they could be leaning here. It talks about Brian Callahan with the Bengals and the meeting with Joe Burrow, where, I mean, very early into the process, the Bengals knew that Joe Burrow was going to be their pick. And yes, I mean, there was obviously the on the field tape stuff at LSU that was the most important part of it. Like, Callahan talks in this piece about how, like, walking in there, listening to Joe Burrow in the meeting and saying, yeah, this is what big time quarterbacks sound like. And that's the way that obviously the Bengals ended up going. It's worked out extremely well. He talks about Mike Borgonzi and the Chiefs having a number one overall pick. and taking a look at a quarterback class, which we've discussed back in 2013, Joe, that did not look all that great, and making some moves that offseason to attack it differently. They brought in Alex Smith. He played pretty high-level quarterback of them for a long time, was a good quarterback, eventually led to Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes took over for Alex Smith, but they ended up taking Eric Fisher with their pick, passing on the quarterbacks, and looking at the quarterbacks in those drafts, it ended up being the right decision. And one of the things Borgonzi talked about in this article was like, we did not deem any of those guys to be worthy of the number 1 overall pick at quarterback. And there's similar conversation, depending on who you talk to, about these guys this year. So, number 1, interesting piece from Albert Breer. If you haven't read it, go check it out at si.com. It's interesting stuff. 2, Joe, your takeaways when you read this piece, comments from Brian Callahan, Mike Borgonzi, and is there any sort of insight that you think we can gain from the history of these guys and what that could mean for the Titans when the number 1 pick rolls around, if they're going to be there for the number 1 overall pick?
Yeah, I mean, if you apply this to this situation, I guess my question would be, okay, so how did those interviews go? And of course, they're having Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders in. What I guess, is it Ward this week?
I believe Ward is Friday and Sanders is Sunday.
Yeah. So, are they having the same effect? The problem is, even if you have a similar effect, the film on Burrow is different than the film on those guys,
yes.
Right? I mean, like already you're talking about a totally different expectation and feel from a quarterback coming into the league based on the previous college season. Again, like the Cam Ward experience was a lot of fun, but it wasn't consistent. I will say, like the Cal game for Cam Ward is the ultimate. Watch that game. After the first half, you'll be convinced he will never sniff an NFL field, and then after like the last couple drives, you're convinced he's the number 1 pick. Like that's a great encapsulation of him. But yeah, I think it is really interesting that you had that experience, and then you had the Borgonzi draft where they're like, yeah, heck no, let's go make a trade for Alex Smith, and then just figure it out. And eventually they got Mahomes. I mean, I think that part of it is like, that's a little bit of a pipe dream, like good for them, but like that can't be necessarily your plan,
Yeah.
Like you just don't know. You don't know when you're going to get an opportunity. You might get it the next year. You might get it never, but they did make themselves solid. And in that draft that they disavowed, Geno Smith was one of the top 2 quarterbacks. He's turned out to be pretty freaking good, but not Patrick Mahomes good, So I think that's a potentially instructive moment in terms of what these guys are going to do. But again, I don't know that look, we already are hearing the kind of predictable Titans are, like have really enjoyed Cam Ward, or they like Cam Ward more than else. I think that was going to come out either way. Maybe, but doesn't mean it's not true. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Maybe they are talking themselves into Cam Ward at number 1.
No, it could be. One of the interesting things Borgonzi talks about in this piece is, the rare athletic traits. And he was talking about Eric Fisher, like he had those athletic traits, and they thought he'd turn into being the top tackle in the draft. This was the quote he gave Albert Breer, quote, when you're taking a guy that high, they got to have rare physical traits for every player that you're looking at. And I don't want to go too far into the quarterbacks, but obviously with Abdul Carter, it's the get off, the bend, and with Travis Hunter, it's the rare instincts and ball skills. There's a rare quality about each one of these players, is what Borgonzi said. So, I mean, he's sitting there like not wanting to necessarily talk about the quarterbacks all that much in that answer, but had no problem naming Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. And look, Joe, I think it's pretty obvious. This is not some hot take by anybody. If the Titans are sticking and picking at number 1, it's probably going to be one of the 2 quarterbacks or Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. That's what it's going to end up being, would be my guess.
Right. I mean, right. And then, of course, they've got all 4 of those guys in this week to make sure that they've gone through as much as they could before free agency starts. So, and again, I think that's smart. I think that makes sense. And so they are, look, good for the Titans for being the worst team in the NFL, because I mean, otherwise, like it'd be way less interesting right now. I mean, they hold the cards.
They do. We'll have more on the NFL draft, more reaction to an interesting piece from Albert Breer. from SI.com coming up next. So some of your thoughts to get to on our text line as well. We'll do that. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, the game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, the game. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Robby and Rexrode, brought to you by First Horizon, big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Ed on the text line says, doesn't the idea that the Titans are entertaining offers for the number one pick indicate a lack of conviction? If you had zero doubt, then why would you entertain offers? No offer would sway you if you're totally convinced that you have your guy. It's from Ed on the text line. Joe, what do you think of
that? First of all, who says they have zero doubt? I mean, why are they doing these? Why are they doing these visits? You know, I mean, and also, even if you did know, you would entertain offers as a GM, right? I mean, you
pick up the phone for sure.
Yeah. Now, Borgonzi said in the Breer piece that, they've basically told teams, we're definitely not going to make any deals until we're through our process, until we have all the information.
Which makes sense.
We can talk.
Like that.
Yeah. So we can talk. You can, we can go back and forth or whatever, but there's not going to be any serious negotiating until we have all the information. Yeah. I don't think that, I mean, all the information we have, all these teams have way more than we do, but based on what we have, would you have a complete conviction on anything? I wouldn't. I mean,
no.
It's hard, and it's very possible. You draft one of these quarterbacks and you suffer for it, and it's just another example of a QB needy team reaching for a quarterback when it should have taken just the best player, and then or you pass on the quarterback, and then Shedeur Sanders becomes an 8-time All-Pro. I mean, so I'm getting every shred of information I can. The most important information is the film, but look, these interviews are very important. I think that piece from Breer illustrated it. Someone comes in and blows the room away, and everybody's just enchanted on top of the film that says this is the number one pick. There you go. Now you have conviction, but it takes extreme things for that to happen by this point.
Well, I said it yesterday. I also think this is the time of year when you have to be real careful of what information is out there and what information is real in your process. For instance, Todd McShay on his show that he now does, which I don't really know where his show is, but I see it stumble across my TikTok from now every now and then, Joe. So I saw it yesterday, and he was on, I guess it's the McShay show, and he was talking about Shedeur Sanders, and he was like, a couple people have told him that when he was meeting with their organization, he didn't seem all that interested in what the organization thought of him, was the way that McShay phrased it. He was like, yeah, he didn't really seem to really care the organization's opinion on him, and he came off a little bit cocky, was the word that McShay used there. So I don't know. Is that true? Does that matter? Is that somebody posturing and making stuff up to affect the draft process this time of year? That's when you get so deep into the mud this time of year that by the end of it, by the time the draft rolls around, Joe, it's hard to know what's real and what's not.
Yeah, I mean, it could be misinformation, but I know that Josina Anderson put out something about a QB coach who really didn't like Shedeur. Well, I can see Shedeur, coming off cocky and rubbing some people the wrong way. So, but you're right. It could be again, the Levis stuff that some people on our station totally took hook, line, and sinker and bought as gospel. But a lot of it was just total BS, and I mean, I still don't even really again, I remember during that, after the Titans drafted him, talking to, Matt Hasselbeck, and he's like, I mean, I guess he's so intense and so into all this that rubs some teams right. But again, that's the problem,
right?
Yeah. So it does feel like, I mean, there's always a possibility for misinformation. I do feel like there's some legitimacy when you have multiple people saying that stuff, that he probably bothered some people, which isn't good for him, because he's already not as talented as Cam Ward. But it also feels like there's more excitement about Cam Ward's interviews. It's
did he bother the Titans? Were the Titans,
I don't know,
secretly kind of upset that Dion called in the middle of their first meeting?
Dion insisted on FaceTiming in the middle of it. Yeah, put me on the big screen over there. Well, the thing is, I mean, I guess if the Titans were bothered, why bother having him in Sunday?
Right.
So I'm sure it's different experiences for different teams and different personalities in those rooms. Different personalities on the coaching and personnel side too. But obviously, you want to be a prospect that just universally is beloved after you go into all those rooms. And that's with these quarterbacks. I feel like it's more important just because there are serious flaws in their games.
How about this one on the text line? Got one that says, we all know Will Levis has an arm. Is it possible he could train with a good coach during the offseason and become a legitimate starting quarterback? Joe, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if it is possible that he could train with a good quarterback coach. And apparently he's going out to California and he's working for a couple of months here to really improve his game. And Brian Callahan talked about that earlier in the season. My initial response to that, Joe, is he could go out there and come to training camp and look like the second coming of Peyton Manning, and I still don't think you can start Will Levis at quarterback next year if you're the Titans.
Yeah, other than it's like you drafted someone and he's still here, and then it's like, okay, so then fine, have a competition, and right now the rookie isn't ready. If that's the case, then okay, then but as far as let's pin our hopes on Will Levis, yeah, I think that's a hard sell right now, and I don't see how it wouldn't be for most people who watched him play last year. Trevor says, sounds like Sanders is interviewing badly with teams he has no interest in and interviewing well with teams he wouldn't mind playing for. That'd be interesting. I would not advise that strategy.
Just go in there and just tank it for the Browns. Like, no. I am not going to Cleveland. I kind of like that.
Armpit fart. The Browns are talking to you, just doing armpit farts. Hey, you guys, can you guys put some TV on for me?
I guess I kind of don't hate that strategy. Like, you're going in to interview with the Jets, and you're like, hey, Woody, you just wait until you see how bad my Madden rating is. You want no part of this, buddy. No part of it.
It's like Step Brothers. He puts on the tuxedo for the Jets interview. Oh man, I would be I'd be your best interview self for any of these interviews. Because again, yes, there's misinformation, but look, I do think that Levis rubbed some teams wrong. I think there was some legitimacy to that, and usually it's hard to dismiss everything that's out there, right? Like
Levis ate all the sun chips. He ate all the sun chips.
It's like things can get exaggerated. Again, I think the Levis thing was a good example of that for sure. But I mean, I think Levis was full intensity for all of his interviews. I believe that.
How about this one from Colts Matt in Springfield, which welcome to the program, Colts Matt. We have a growing number of Colts fans on the text line. It says, nice. Don't sleep on the Colts bringing in Darnold. It makes a lot of sense. I don't necessarily dismiss that out of hand, Joe. Like, I realize they drafted Anthony Richardson, and, it's been poor to this point. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Like, I'm looking at Steichen, and I'm looking at Ballard, and conventional wisdom tells me they better win this year if they want to keep their jobs. Whether or not that's true, I have no idea because Jim Irsay is a strange cat. But I do wonder, like, could Indianapolis sneak up and do something unexpected this offseason at the quarterback position?
Yeah, that would surprise me a little bit. But, I mean, if they did that to me says, okay, the Anthony Richardson thing is close to ending.
Yeah.
Because Darnold's going to beat him out. I mean, the way Darnold played last year, yes, good conditions. No, you can't dismiss what he did still as a quarterback. I mean, he would win the job, So I guess, I don't know what the heck they're doing. I mean, I guess I would, if I'm a Colts fan, I'd rather hear an actual good quarterback who can start. I'd rather have that than let's bring in another like mid QB to compete with him, right? But like what Darnold's only signing with them. I mean, if you're Darnold in that situation, I'd be hesitant. You're only signing with them if they give you a good deal. Like someone else out there is going to give you a good. So if they're giving him that deal, he's going there to be their starter. I mean, that's it to me. That's Anthony.
No doubt. Done. Well, but also if you're signing him, if you're Indianapolis, I mean, that tells you that they're done with Anthony Richardson. I don't think they're going to go sign Sam Darnold. They are in an interesting spot to me in terms of it's been so bad from Richardson and I'm looking at their future as a coaching staff, as a general manager. Like, how long, what sort of a leash are you giving Anthony Richardson this year? Like, they already benched him once, and then they turned back to him. You just going to let him go the whole year next year? What if you get 3 games in and you realize he's not gotten a whole lot better, and maybe that's just what he is as a quarterback? You're just going to say, well, I guess we're getting fired at the end of the year. I don't know. They're just in a weird spot right now.
Yeah. So, yeah, to me, that's a clear signal of we will get fired if we go anymore with this guy. So let's give this one a shot, because this guy could actually, in this offense, could actually win for us. That'd be tough. That'd be tough for the Titans to lose him to the dreaded, hated Colts.
It would. You could always pivot to Mac Jones. Mac Jones going to be out there.
Or Daniel, either Jones.
Or got a couple options with the Joneses out there. 615-737-1025. Our phone number, 615-737-1025. Another news item yesterday in the NFL on the tag front, which I don't think has made this player very happy. We'll get into that coming up next. Also, it's time for Pred's Pick to Click. Be the first caller at 615-737-1025. Our phone number. If you guess a goal scorer for the Predators in their game tonight against Boston, you win a pair of tickets to a future Nashville Predators home game. We'll do all that coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game. Preds pick to click here on Robby and Rexrode. Preds in action tonight, taking on the Boston Bruins in game number 3 of their 3-game road trip. Puck drop at 6 o'clock. I'll have your pregame at 5 o'clock tonight. Rexrode extending his lead last time out in the competition. He nailed it with Philip Forsberg against Winnipeg. So Joe has 12 correct answers. The listeners have 8. I have 7. Keezer remains at 4 in the competition. With that in mind, we head to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in Adam in Portland as a participant in Preds Pick to Click today. Adam, good morning. Thank you for calling in. Who is your pick to click?
What's up, dude? Let's go Stammer. He can only be cold for so long. Now I do like Joe. He said a couple of times previously that he hopes nobody hits, and I feel like that could actually happen. But I will go Stamkos just for the fun of it.
Going with Steven Stamkos. Adam, thank you for the call.
Yeah, bud.
Stamkos off the board. I'll go Forsberg. I don't feel great about any option right now. They can't score, and Forsberg basically said that the other night. But I'll go Forsberg. So Stamkos, Forsberg off the board. Keezer, your pick to click for the Nashville Predators.
I'll go with Luke Evangelista.
I like it. Luke Evangelista. Stamkos, Forsberg, Evangelista off the board. Rexrode, your pick to click for the Predators.
Unpaid contributors to the station are allowed to be in this competition. I did not know.
Apparently so. DJ Burnside will be next.
Yeah. I'll go Ryan O'Reilly.
Ryan O'Reilly, this selection. Stamkos, Forsberg, Evangelista, O'Reilly. Preds in action tonight, taking on the Boston Bruins. By the way, if you're on Tank Watch out there, last night, pretty good result for the Predators. The Blackhawks win last night. Sabres end up with a point last night, which extends their lead ahead of you to 5. The Sharks won last night, so everything's going well out there for the Nashville Predators on that front from the results last night. Joe, an interesting development in the NFL that, again, not unexpected, but now looks like it's officially happening. T. Higgins getting the franchise tag in Cincinnati for the 2nd consecutive year. Now, look, we talked about the tag earlier with Darnold. I will say this. I'm not a huge fan of somebody being tagged 2 years in a row. Not a huge fan of that. Hopefully the NFLPA will address that next time around, but I don't really love that. But apparently that's happening with T. Higgins here, and the intent remains for Cincinnati to work out a long-term deal with him. We'll see whether or not they're able to get that done. By the way, they need to work out a long-term deal with Jamar Chase as well. So a busy offseason for Cincinnati coming up here. What do you make of the official news that T. Higgins will be franchise tagged for the 2nd consecutive year?
Yeah, not a big fan. Like I said earlier, you know, the Washington football team did that with Kirk Cousins 2 years in a row, and you know, kind of that different situation, but hated that then. And you know, the Bengals, of course, notoriously cheap as an organization, but Joe Burrow's been out there basically like, man, you guys better get these people signed. You know, it's an interesting, you know, if you're the Bengals, it's like, wow, we had these people and look at what we did last year, but where are you going to go? How much are you going to waste Joe Burrow's tenure if you don't, if you don't pay your best players? So I guess they'll figure it out, but this is to have all these guys and the deals you're going to have is definitely a different kind of deal for the Bengals.
I still wonder if this is the right move. I really do. Like, I get it. T. Higgins, in terms of number 2 wide receivers, I think is a really good player. Obviously, he's really important to what they do. But they've got to sign him. They've got to sign Jamar Chase. And they got to sign Trey Hendrickson, too. And are they going to be able to pull all of that off? You know, Paul Dehner, friend of the show, who covers the Bengals for The Athletic, wrote a piece about this the other day, just about how difficult this could be and how much skepticism is there around the league that they're going to be able to pull this off, getting all 3 done. Like, if you franchise tag T. Higgins, but it ends up costing you Trey Hendrickson, like, is that really worth it if you're the Bengals? Like, I think Jamar Chase is a non-negotiable, right? Like, you have to pay Jamar Chase. You got to find a way to get a deal done with him. I think we all know that. Like, if you tag T. Higgins and you're either unwilling or unable to go sign Hendrickson to a long-term deal after that, Like, is it really worth signing or tagging T. Higgins at that point? Like, if I had to pick 2 of the 3 that I would want to keep, Higgins would be the odd man out if I were the Bengals.
But for sure. No, I absolutely agree. He's clearly the last priority. Yeah, it's that fascinating question of how much is, if at all, is his value inflated by playing with Chase, playing with Burrow, and then the health thing is definitely something you got. That's the thing. Like, so if I'm the Bengals, I wouldn't necessarily hate just having him play on the tag, but obviously that's probably like relationship ending for him in the organization, right? Like, that would be, it could be bad. It could be bad next year if they don't figure it out. Is it possible that they're just never going to come together on what the term should be, and then they look to trade him?
Maybe. I mean, that could end up happening. I just, they're so, you said it, they're notoriously cheap. There's a lot of skepticism around the league if they're going to be able to pull this off with all 3 of them. And again, let's say they do. Okay. Are they still a Super Bowl threat? Like, we always include them in that category because they've got Burrow, right? And they've got Chase and they've got these guys. And yet they made the Super Bowl a few years ago. They were in the AFC title game the year after that. And now they've missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. I realize that injuries have been part of that, but injuries weren't a huge problem for them last year, Joe. They just had a horrific defense and they wasted an MVP quality season from Joe Burrow. So is that going to be different next year? Like, they're in a really weird spot right now with this group.
Right. They're deep. You fire. I mean, Lou Anarumo was one of the most celebrated D coordinators in the league not long ago. He's out. And you look at their defense and they just have holes all over the place. So how much can you improve that in a year, in an off season? And can you improve it enough to where, like, I guess, can you get to decent so that you hope that your offense is just absolutely unbelievable? I mean, like you said, Burrow, especially second half of the year, his numbers were incredible, but they also had to be.
Yeah.
In the games that they were in. So, look, if you're the Bengals, you have to me, you have star players, and then you have players who have gotten to the Super Bowl. So you have to invest in that. But they could be one of those teams that has a huge comeback next year. You get it off to an early, good start, and you could see how it could work out, but they have a lot of work to do.
Coming up next, we'll be joined by Mike Wilson from the Knoxville News Sentinel. We'll get his thoughts on Tennessee's huge win against Alabama over the weekend, what that can mean for the Vols looking ahead to the SEC and NCAA tournaments. That's coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you. Brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get it all. We head to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our friend Mike Wilson, who covers the Tennessee Vols for the Knoxville News Sentinel. Mike, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I just wanted to establish earlier that I would franchise tag you guys to make sure you're not going anywhere.
We appreciate that. That really means a lot, and probably a situation there, Mike, where we wouldn't be upset about a tag like so many players seem to be.
I want a long-term
we'd
deal,
work
man.
it out. It'd be good.
Just throw
Don't chase.
Rexrode some biscuits. He'll be fine. He'll take the franchise tag, and it'll be good. So, Mike, obviously a huge game, a huge win, great environment for Tennessee on Saturday against Alabama. With the win, what does that do for their pursuit of a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament? How much work still left to accomplish for the Vols in the regular season and the SEC tournament in your mind?
Well, I think it's more of a don't blow it, which is kind of the same situation as last year, which they did do when they went to the SEC tournament and got absolutely shellacked by Mississippi State. You got Ole Miss on Wednesday. You got South Carolina, who's the worst team in the SEC, on Saturday to close. You probably afford to go 1-1 in those if you win a game in Nashville and still be potentially in line for that 1 seed, because Alabama and Florida are the primary competitors, and Alabama plays Florida, and Alabama closes at Auburn. So you're expecting them to take at least one loss. Florida also has Ole Miss. So you can see them going 1-1 as well. So things are good, but Tennessee needs to keep winning if it wants to hold down that 1 seed spot.
Well, how surprised are you, Mike? I was with you guys in the Tennessee-Auburn game, and I did not detect a lot of expectation that the Vols would be pushing for a 1 seed at that point. I also didn't detect a lot of expectation of a close game going into it, and obviously they mucked that one up, and that was a game they probably should have won at Auburn. But obviously they've gotten I'd say a lot better since then, right? Like where have they surprised you in the last few weeks to get back to this point where they're pushing for a 1?
And I think a lot of it, Felix Okpara is playing really well, really consistently. And that is something they didn't have last season, is just you knew what you were going to get from a big man. You knew you could get good stuff from the big men last year, but you didn't know that you were going to get it. I think that's part of it. I also think Jordan Gainey has changed the outlook of this team by proving, and he started proving it probably in December, that he can play point guard at a good enough level for them to be okay with Zakai off ball or off the court, even for little stretches. His scoring is paramount to this team. He did it again against Alabama. I mean, you know this identity. The defense is going to keep Tennessee in games. They're always going to be able to win because of that. It's just always been a matter of, are they going to score enough to do it? They're showing right now they can. They're getting it from Chaz Lanier. They're getting, basically 15 or plus every game from Zakai Ziegler. And it's a good recipe when you've got a bunch of senior guards scoring a lot of points like that.
Mike, obviously a lot of conversation around Jemai Mashak lately. What about that moment for him on Saturday to hit that shot in the fashion that he did, and just what that means for him and kind of the symbol that he is for that program?
Yeah, the best way I can sum it up is it's the guy who does all the things no one ever sees, doing the thing you can't miss. And Jemai's been a little maligned. The Tennessee fan base wanted him to not start. A portion of the Tennessee fan base has wanted him to not start and put Jordan Gainey in instead for the offensive factor. And that's been a conversation for a lot of the season, to the point that people are discussing, is Tennessee better when Jemai Mashak's off the court? The answer's been no. The answer remains no. And I thought Saturday was a real big moment for a guy to rise up and people who've questioned him be able to be like, okay, yeah, like he's a pretty good basketball player. He wins games in a lot of ways, because forget the shot. He won the game in the final 10 minutes and certainly in the final 30 seconds with everything he did, from the hustle for the rebound and getting fouled, forcing the tie up. He denied Mark Sears the ball in the corner on Alabama's inbound. I mean, he won the game in so many ways down the stretch. And I thought it was just really fitting. That again, the guy who does things that you've never seen in the box score did so many things that fit to who he is, and then also hit the shot to win the game.
Have you ever covered a better two things: glue guy / on-ball defender than Meshack?
No. Only player that came to mind at all was Dwayne Notice at South Carolina as a really good on-ball defender. He was a little bit smaller, more of a point defender and two defender than a guy who can guard anywhere. So no. And you saw the love for the team, right? You saw the way the players responded to Jemai being the one to make that shot. And that's special. That's a really special thing. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy that you almost want to tell people, hey, watch him play defense for just like 3 straight possessions. Don't watch the ball. Don't watch anything else. Watch what Jemai Meshack does, because he ruins people's lives defensively. It's really impressive to watch, and that's one of the reasons that Tennessee's been so good throughout his whole career.
Well, and another thing about him, Mike, and I actually tweeted this last year. I'm like, Meshack next year will be like a 12-point a game scorer, because he's always had like his shot form is fine. It's wild to me that he's still so hesitant to shoot. I mean, he's what, a 35% guy this year, but 15 makes. Why? I mean, I can't buy that Rick Barnes is down on him shooting. I mean, you want to space the floor. You want defenses to have to account for him. Is it just as simple as he just hasn't been able to find his confidence, or just have enough confidence to let it fly?
That's a great question. And we do like a bold predictions type of story before every season. One of mine almost was exactly what you just said, of Jemai Meshack's going to be a double-digit scorer. I didn't end up doing that, but it felt like an assumption that it was bold to an extent, but also achievable for Jemai to be that guy. He's especially good in that corner. I mean, you saw him hit that one against Vanderbilt, and he did that against Alabama last year as well. But you've also seen the way that teams just don't expect him to shoot. I mean, Illinois was the first this year you really saw it, where Brad Underwood basically was like, yeah, well, he can shoot all he wants. Like, that's what we want. And just stagged off him. And teams have kind of continued to do that. So I don't know the mental effect of that on a player. I don't know how that would change your readiness to shoot and your willingness to shoot. But he's shown he can score a little bit. But I think what's been good offensively is he's found those dribble drives, a little like turn hook. He's found little ways to score and affect the game. I mean, he had 2 of those in the second half against Alabama when Tennessee was teetering a little bit and having really bad offensive possessions. So he's found other ways to score, even if he's not going to shoot.
So, Mike, I think some Tennessee fans throughout the year, and I would probably include myself in this discussion, have been kind of waiting for, all right, they look really good. We know that they're good defensively. Like, is an offensive dud coming in the tournament that's just going to get up and bite them at some point? Do you feel like they've made enough strides offensively as the year has gone on, where you're significantly less worried about that if you're a Tennessee fan heading into the tournament? Or is that still a fear that you have and you think Tennessee fans should have when the tournament comes around?
What is it, battered ball syndrome?
That's exactly
lingers
what it is.
around out there. As of, and I haven't checked the numbers yet after this weekend, but as of this time last week, Tennessee was better offensively, analytically, than they were last year. And I think that probably blows people's minds to some extent, because you saw Dalton connect. So Tennessee's offense looked unfathomably good so often because of Dalton Connect. But technically, this team has a better offense than what last year's had, and a better defense. So on paper, this team's actually better than last year's, and that team made the Elite Eight. So I get it. It doesn't look sexy all the time. So you do think maybe that dud is coming, because they've had a couple of them this year again. And they had that Kentucky shooting game. They had the Florida loss by 30. So you do kind of wonder. But I think this team's shown a lot more consistency probably in the last month now, that's not likely to happen. But, I mean, wrong matchup, wrong time. That is March.
Well, I do feel like, I think it just seems to me, Mike, like that little injury for Zakai and quick break. One, all of a sudden he comes back and he's hitting shots again. So It's like, did he just need like a couple of days to just lie in bed? I don't know, but he's hitting shot. But also, I just feel like they were forced to, I think sometimes they get stagnant, but last year's team did too. Sometimes they would get stagnant. Let's stand around, give the ball to Dalton, get out of the way. Now it worked enough, right? Because he was so freaking good. But
Mhm.
I feel like this team stands around sometimes. It kind of dribbles all over the place, and then when he was out and when he is out, if he's on the bench for a minute, you got to move. You got to move the ball side to side. You got to move off the ball more. I feel like they look like a team that runs a more lively offense sometimes when he's not on the floor. I mean, obviously the best combination of it is for him to be on the floor hitting shots and all of them to be playing that way. But do you feel like that stretch sort of helped them figure some things out on that side of the ball?
It probably didn't hurt. I mean, I think I saw, and we all saw what you're talking about near the end of the Alabama game. They really had a lot of those possessions again, where it was, all right, Zakai, save us. Do something for us. We don't know what to do right now. That can't be a thing. I think I tweeted it at some point late in that game. Chaz Lanier, and he probably has already, but needs to do it more. Be showing film of Santiago Vescovi moving without the ball. A guy who did everything he could to run until he got open. Because there were a couple of possessions late in that game where Chaz was just kind of standing on the wing, and he's your best offensive player. Or your best shooter. You can't have that. You can't have that in that moment where you need a bucket, and he just becomes kind of a non-factor offensively. That's not an option. So yeah, I agree. I mean, Tennessee needs to avoid that lull where they fall into the save us Zakai mindset. He's not Dalton. He's not a 6'6" wing that can kind of do whatever he wants. So it's a little bit of an unrealistic expectation for him to match that, So I do think that that's out there. And I do think, as you're saying, Jordan Gainey showed a stress relief there when he did what he did against Florida when Zakai was out. So they figured some of that out. I think the question now moving forward is, does Igor Milicic get back to where he was? Because that's kind of that four-man missing piece of the offense right now that, I mean, his splits in SEC play shooting-wise are great, but the production hasn't been as awesome from him the past couple games.
All right, Mike, last thing for you. When Tony Vitello's not offering his thoughts on what the tournament seeding should look like in the NCAA basketball tournament, is he right now on the path to rolling off a dynasty here and just winning national championships all the time?
Good golly. This team's off to a more impressive start than last year's team, just with the way it looks, the way things are going. Certainly still some things to figure out pitching staff-wise, I think. Can the starting rotation hold up as it is? But, man, it's impressive to watch. And I think when you look at how Texas A&M struggled to start the season, Mississippi State and Ole Miss, the way their seasons went after they won national championships, to keep it going, to open a new season the way Tony Vitello has done, that's pretty impressive to do.
No doubt about it. Great stuff, Mike. As always, appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning, and we will talk to you soon.
Yep. Thanks for gladly accepting the franchise tag.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for offering it. We appreciate it. Mike Wilson, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll react to what Mike had to say come next. Couple of your thoughts to get to on the Vols on the text line as well. We'll do that. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. This week's Nashville's Best Deal is from Brewster's Real Ice Cream in Hendersonville. See why Brewster's is a scoop above the rest with the best ice cream, shakes, sundaes, splits, blasts, and more. Visit thegamenashville.com/deals and get half off a $50 gift card while supplies last. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Over the $99 yearly Beehive membership with the Buzz is always about great service. Appreciate Mike Wilson for being with us in the last segment. Joe, it's interesting. I think a lot of people like me are surprised to hear that Tennessee, analytically, a better offensive team this year than they were last year with Dalton Knecht. They're in line right now to be a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. They just had a huge win against Alabama. And yet I still feel like there's probably a significant portion of Vol Twitter, the Vol fan base. It's kind of like waiting for that shoe to drop when the tournament comes around. How do you view this year's team, the chances they have as the NCAA tournament is right around the corner, and the improvements that they've made on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, like I watch them play, and they're not as enjoyable as last year's team. Knecht is the big reason. Chaz Lanier is a very different player. But the thing about Chaz Lanier is he's one of the best 3-point shooters out there. So that helps your offensive efficiency right there. I mean, he obviously cannot take over games, does not put the ball on the floor and go just get a bucket whenever he needs one. He's very good. Like Mike said, when he moves, when he's coming off screens, when he's doing that at a high level, at getting shots and making them. It's interesting. He brings up Vescovi. Of course, if anybody remembers last year, and Vescovi's entire career, he played point guard, he played off guard. Everything he did to the max, but he couldn't make a shot last year. I mean, it got to the point where it was hard to watch. And when he did make one, it was like a huge emotional lift for the team. But if Lanier could be off the ball like Vescovi was, then I agree he'd get more shots and score more points. But I look at like last year's bigs, Jonas Adu. It's hard to remember this because he barely plays for Arkansas, which is very weird. But he was a really good player last year. I mean, I think I might disagree with Mike's assessment a little bit of the front court because Tobe Awaka came in and he got every rebound. So I thought the two bigs last year, I've thought a lot of the year it's a downgrade. But Okpara, look, all he is a lob catcher basically, right? He's a rim runner, but he rebounds the heck out of the ball, and he is a better rim protector, which is why they have the number 1 defense. But I know we're not talking about defense; we're talking about offense. I just think that I think that Gainey is better, and Milicic, he's the guy who, man, when he gets a look, he is dangerous. So I think with Lanier and Milicic, you have, and then Gainey shooting better. Because remember, Gainey last year in SEC play was like 20-some%. Like they're as a team, they were remember, like the Texas game, they couldn't hit a shot. They won it in the NCAA tournament, but they couldn't hit a shot. So it was like Knecht and a bunch of guys who have forgotten how to shoot the ball. Whereas now they have more guys who are hitting shots. But I think Igor is a guy who I think they should almost run more stuff for and get him going. Because when he's stretching the floor from the 4, now you really put teams in a bind, and Zakai has all kinds of room in the lane to maneuver.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you bring up the point for Zakai Ziegler when he missed that time. Did that almost kind of serve as a reset for him this year? And I guess the bigger question is that going to last heading into the tournament, Joe? Like, is he going to be able to hit shots at the rate he's hitting them right now when the tournament comes around? One thing that I totally agree with Mike, like Gainey, I think has made a huge difference. And Gainey, we talked about him yesterday in the Alabama game specifically. I think he was a big reason why they won that game. And if they can continue to get that level of play or close to it out of Jordan Gainey moving forward, to me, that's a big difference maker for them if they're able to get that. And he's able to play that way. And look, I mean, obviously you don't want to repeat Saturday in terms of like Ziegler getting immediately in foul trouble in the game. But I do think there was probably a point earlier this year where if that would have happened, Joe, they would have been screwed. I mean, it's just, and I feel like they've learned to adapt with that as the season has gone along.
Yeah. And then, I kind of thought at one point a few weeks ago, like, unless Darling Stone DeBar gets going, I just don't see how they have enough. Cade Phillips off the bench has been really nice. He goes in there, he'll grab you a rebound, get you done. Like he's run all over the place. That's a great depth piece for the front court. The back court's still, man, they're still pretty strapped, they could use another contributor there. And DeBar looks good shooting the ball at times. He just hasn't been able to carve out too much of a role. But yeah, Gainey is less reliant on just shooting. He has realized he can get into the lane. He can get fouled, put the ball on the floor and do things like that. So, I mean, look, I feel like whenever we talk about Tennessee basketball, most of the reaction is like a lot of like they're going to lay an egg. And also I feel like it's mostly Kentucky fans commenting as opposed to Tennessee fans. But, a lot of skepticism, and that's fine. But they did just make the Elite Eight last year. I mean, Dustin from Hopkinsville just going nuts on this 1 seed. Okay. He's saying you can't argue they're worthy of a 1. No, they're absolutely in there for a 1. Yes, I understand that Kentucky's had bad injuries, all that. Florida, Houston, Bama, Tennessee. 2 of those teams are getting a 1 seed. All of them have flaws in their resume. Tennessee lost both games to Kentucky, but Kentucky's still a 4 seed, 3-4 seed. All those other teams have ups and downs too. Florida and Tennessee blew each other out. So, I mean, it's very close. I have them as a 1 today in my bracket, but I mean, I have them as the last 1, and I have Bama right there. Like them.
Oh, and you're the nation's leading bracketologist, so people should just be quiet and listen to what you say.
Well, that's true. Actually, I prefer bracket enterologist.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever you prefer. That's what we'll go with.
Bracketometrist.
That's right. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get the latest NFL headlines as we approach NFL free agency. Also, the tag deadline today in the National Football League. Plus, closing in on the NHL trading deadline on Friday. The latest on that front as well. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. I got a pair of tickets to give away to Clean Comedy Night with Italian stand-up comedian Marcus Saputo at the Franklin Theater coming up on Thursday, March 13th. Be caller 3, 615-737-1025. Our phone number, 615-737-1025. Robby and Rexrode here with you. We'll have the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode coming up at 7:45. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic will join us at 8:30. We'll get into some conversations that he's had, some takeaways from the quarterbacks at the NFL Combine, and more with him coming up at 8:30. So looking forward to that. Right now, taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025. Joe, the tag deadline today in the National Football League, that coming up at 3 p.m. Central Time. Darnold doesn't look like he's going to be tagged by Minnesota. We talked about that earlier in the show. A lot of debate among Titans fans as to like how worthwhile the pursuit of a Sam Darnold would be. One thing I've seen, Joe, is that the length of the contract required scares some people off, right? Like he's younger than a lot of these guys. Obviously, when you're talking about like Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers, significantly younger than those guys. Had a great season last year, and you still had the last two games and the way things ended that I think scares a lot of people. I'd really love to know, like, what's it going to take to land Darnold? Like, when he gets through this process, whether he somehow ends up back in Minnesota or more likely at this point, I think he ends up elsewhere. What's he getting? Like, what's the number going to look like on a year-by-year basis? Is it going to be a 3-year deal, 4-year deal? Like, what's Sam Darnold going to get on the open market out there? I think that's a really fascinating question based on the way he played for the majority of last year and how bad it was the last two games.
Yeah, it's become one of the big questions in the league now. It has to be. Look, I have to put him at the top now. Stafford's gone. He's no longer a topic of conversation. Is there anybody else who could wiggle free? I don't see it. So I think Darnold is the clear number one. Now that's a depressing state of the market because there are still questions about Sam Darnold, but I would take him over any of the other possible quarterbacks you can get. So if that's how the league views him, how much does that inflate his value? I watched quite a bit of him last year, and I was impressed. I think he's good. I think that he's going to come into a team, a lot of these possible teams that could be pursuing him. He would immediately improve them because he's a pretty significant upgrade. I think he's an upgrade over, I know Russ had a good run last year, and then he sort of ripped off the mask late with some of those terrible turnovers. But I think Darnold is even a better player than like Russ when he was playing well last year. Am I convicted in that, given again everything that was around him, and then those last two games are like, that's the thing. I'd love to see the conversation, even like the Vikings decision making.
Yeah.
Let's say he lost in a shootout, but he was amazing in Detroit. The same thing, even if they don't win those games, but he plays great. Or obviously if they win and do more and go deeper in the playoffs, I think it would almost be like, even like the Vikings fan base, would they be like, what are you doing? You're going to turn this over to a rookie? And yet now it looks like they're turning it over to a rookie, after that. So then you take it to all the other teams and it's like, do the Vikings think that there's a little bit of emperor with no clothes here with him, that they propped him up, and they think this rookie who tore his ACL in camp is just going to come in and be as good or better? I mean, maybe that means J.J. McCarthy is just going to be incredible and about to, but that might make you be a little hesitant with Sam Darnold.
Well, right now, you got Darnold that looks like he's going to be out there. Cousins, Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Fields, Garoppolo, who we never talk about. And then it gets into the Brissetts and the Winstons and the Daniel Joneses and Mac Joneses of the world. By the way, Marcus out there and available this offseason as well. So we'll see what ends up happening with him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Darnold, where he's at in his career right now, is clearly the best option. Is he are you comfortable committing to him for 3 years if you're the Titans? That would be, I think, the question. Age-wise, yeah. But is he are you convinced after the one really good year that he had that that's what he can be in the NFL? And look, people are talking about he's not good enough to win a Super Bowl. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'm not really worried about that right now, Joe. I'm not worried about the quarterback that's good enough to win the Super Bowl. Let's get back to respectability, and then we can start worrying about quarterbacks good enough to win the Super Bowl after that. But, is Sam Darnold, we see this a lot in the NFL of quarterbacks that can play pretty well for a year and they're in the right situation. Can they follow it up? Like, one of the things I was interested to see this past season was Baker Mayfield. Mayfield went down to Tampa and he had a really good first year. And it was like, wow, well, look at Baker. Good for Baker. Could he do it again? Well, he did. He went down there and he did it again in Tampa Bay. Now, that's staying with the same team, but he did change coordinators, which has been something that's been very common in his career. So, I also think if you get Darnold, Joe, that's a big test for Brian Callahan, because we have just seen Darnold with Kevin O'Connell, who we know is a really good head coach and a really good play caller, get the best out of him. Well, can Brian Callahan approach getting the best out of him? That's a big test for your head coach and your play caller at that point too.
No, that's a great point. We think about Callahan in terms of if they bring in a rookie, okay, you better work some magic, because nothing worked with Levis. But you're right, Darnold, you have to look at Kevin O'Connell and say, my goodness, great work by you. So you can't have any drop off, even though Darnold would be going to a much, much worse situation.
Yes.
Take the coaching out of it, just the roster situation. I think so here's a texter who says, seems to me one decent year over several bad years isn't enough to go after Darnold. So I think we have to, I think that's an exaggeration of Darnold's career. Look, I'm not saying that you get a complete pass. It's like Men in Black. You just erase your memory from playing with the Jets. But I mean, the Jets, pretty consistently awful organization. And I think you have to get a little bit of a mulligan. We've talked about this, but a couple things. Charles Robinson on our show said, man, he told us at one point, I think it was when we were talking about Trey Lance and people were still wondering if he could be good. But Charles was like, I mean, they like Darnold. Darnold is really impressing them. They really like him. Also, he did play well in Carolina. It's kind of forgotten it's the end of a lost season, but he played well. So several bad years, is not an accurate recap of his career. Certainly he had never put together anything close to what he did last year. So why is that? I mean, I would argue he finally got good opportunity and again had great things in place to help him. So it's the question of, okay, is he good enough to elevate a lesser situation?
Joe, the NHL trade deadline a few days away, comes up on Friday. No new moves from the Predators to this point. The biggest move around the league to this point in terms of just purely the deadline is probably Seth Jones going from Chicago to the Florida Panthers. So we'll see what that looks like for him. Now, I was
got himself out of Chicago. Congratulations, Seth. All you got to do is speak up, baby.
Way to go, Seth. Get yourself out of there. Chicago to Florida. Wow. That's a heck of a difference.
Happy for him.
Right there. So we'll see what happens. I was listening to 32 Thoughts podcast yesterday with Friedman, and there's not a ton of new information on the Predators. Like, he talked about the door being open on Andrew Brunette in terms of his future and what that's going to look like. One thing he did say was, Trotz last week with Jared talked about how he sat down with some of his older players and outlined the plan moving forward and said, basically, hey, if you're not on board and you don't like this, let me know and I'll move you. And Friedman said he made some calls and talked with some people about that. And best he can tell is there's nobody that's in this core right now that is locked down long-term that has made any indication to Barry Trotz that they want out at this point. So doesn't necessarily guarantee things. Look, they got through the season last year, Joe, and then Ryan McDonough, as soon as the season ended, say, hey, can you please trade me back to Tampa Bay? So, things can happen from now until the end of the year, but that's Friedman's indication to this point is that none of the veterans appear to want out of this thing right now.
Hey, people like Nashville, man. People like Nashville. People are treated well in their organization. People like no state income tax. People like Robby and Nick asking them questions.
Of course. Probably the highlight of their season.
It's a lot of positives.
A lot of stuff going on there. 615-737-1025, our phone number. The Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode is next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, the game.
Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes he's just, well, Joe.
Awkward moment, let's do it.
This is the Rex Rant, now on Robby and Rexrode.
And I'm going to egg your house. Egg your house. It is that time of the day, time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. You can check it out every morning here on the program. Joseph, the floor is yours. I turn things over to you.
Thank you. So before we get to Greg Sankey, which I know I need to get to quickly because, my God, he talks forever, but I swear it's worth every word, folks. This is going to be a quote that changes your life from Greg Sankey. Real quick, I do want to say I kind of feel bad because I got Big Joe and Koharski fighting yesterday on Twitter. Koharski, of course, going overboard, excessively mean. Big Joe kind of, ripped. He always, Titans beat writer when some national guy breaks a story. And I just tweeted Joe. I'm like, Joe, actually the local beat writers actually did have this story first. And then I was like, the joke's over your head. I'm like, no, the joke's not over my head. You just, if you're going to make that joke, like the Titans beat writers actually have to get beat by a national reporter, right? I'm just, I'm not trying to cape for anybody. I'm just kind of speaking on their behalf. And then, of course, Koharski comes in with Koharski yesterday was just attacking everyone.
Koharski's ready to fight yesterday.
So I'm hoping Big Joe stuffs him in a trash can tomorrow. So we will hope for that at the end of our program. But today I want to talk about Greg Sankey. Paul Feinbaum. Feinbaum had me on last week to talk about all this scheduling stuff and said, and on the show now, Joe Rexrode. Just would like to point that out.
Wow, that's the first time.
How about that? But Feinbaum had Sankey on, and Greg Sankey asking about, I guess the news item out of what Sankey said is that, the nine games looks like it's coming, and that's great for the SEC. But also, of course, the absolute biggest rant we should all in the sports world have, which is screaming at anyone who suggests that there should be 4 auto bids for the Big Ten, 4 auto bids for the SEC, and 2 for the ACC and Big 12 in future playoff iterations. So Paul Feinbaum asked Greg Sankey about that. Now, allocations is the word that Sankey uses, so keep that in mind. And here is Greg Sankey's glorious response.
First, Paul, I'll go back to, and I've not spoken to Bill Connolly. He's not called to ask me what I actually think are my position. So I'll go back over time. I have said repeatedly the top fill-in-the-blank teams are my personal view and priority. That doesn't exclude other options, and that's not what we've done in the 12-team playoff. Allocations have been made. So allocations to bring teams forward into the top 4 that then impact the ability of a school to be in the top 4, displace them into hosting, or a school that might host moves into traveling. We saw that last year in our own league. So I think we need to understand allocations have been made. I am asked within our own league, are there other opportunities for allocations? I haven't used the word automatic bid, and that's not actually what we have right now. We have conference champion access for the 4 most highly rated conference champion. My advocacy was no concessions and no assurances in that process. But to have the opportunity to expand the playoff, that wasn't going to take place. So I'll go back to New Orleans. We had a press gathering afterwards, and I said, I think what's right is for me to express our ideas to colleagues in a room and talk about the background of those ideas. So, Paul, have our athletics directors joined in conversation about more allocations, whether you want to call that automatic bid? Sure. They've also talked about ideas of evaluating strength of schedule and trying to better understand how that analysis is made. How can we better understand how the CFP selection committee makes its decisions? That's really not a specific judgment. It does need to inform our decision making. So I'm rightly accountable for my words. And what I said after that meeting was, I think we have to go into a CFP meeting with our colleagues and explain our issues, just like we have to learn from their issues, their concerns, their perspectives. Now, we had athletics directors that expressed opinions. And I respect their right to do so. And those became very much the focus. I think we should probably slow down a little bit at jumping to conclusions, because there's a lot of work to do in a short period of time, whether it be our scheduling decisions or discussions about the future college football playoff. I will say this, and I'll say it again. I think what we learned after conference membership movement and looking at a system that was designed in 2019, 20, and 21, that the rankings versus seedings, the ability to be in the top 4, to be in the next 4 and host, and then the ability to be in the top 12 and have the chance to play in the college football playoff, those look a little bit different. And that's why I was direct in saying I think we really need to look at adjusting that ranking versus seeding approach that was introduced with this first year.
There it is. I hope you all understand what's going on now. But here is my takeaway from that. Within that, you could pick out a little bit of the, and essentially, Greg Sankey kind of pawning it off. Did some athletic directors bring this up? They did. Let's pump the brakes. Now, look, I'll tell you this. There are some athletic directors who absolutely are in favor of this in these leagues and look at it like, if you're in my shoes and you understand the financial challenges that are ahead and you have that money guaranteed in your budget, yes, please. But what I really think this is, Robby, when you listen to that and between that and the fact that the last thing, Sankey and Petiti got out of there and didn't address this directly, I think we're winning. I think this is not going to happen. I think that the public and media sentiment is too angrily against this whole idea that I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe I'm just going to absolutely eat those words in misery because it does end up happening. But I think this is one that they realize, oh, that stove is too hot, baby. That stove is too hot. The people are not going to stand for this. And if that's the case, then by golly, I'll take all the Greg Sankey word salad. I'll sit there and listen to it and go to sleep to it. That's fantastic. As long as they don't actually try to pull this garbage.
Well, I'm glad you took something from that, because I sat there the whole time and didn't understand a word they said. That felt to me like, when the English teacher gives you a writing assignment and is like, hey, this needs to be 7 pages, and you run out of ideas about 2.5 pages into it. So you just start throwing big words out there, hoping to get it done at the end of it. I didn't understand a single word he said the whole time. And he was standing up while he was delivering that speech, which was also in the middle of his office, which was weird.
I like that little standing workstation. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've done that many, many times, actually. It usually work pretty well.
Wow, I still got 3 pages left
I
to get through on this thing. Good gracious. Let's start repeating things and using big vocabulary words. Where's a thesaurus?
Yeah. And again, if there was conviction, and I'm not saying that this is Sankey's idea, but obviously he's the guy who's going to take he's the lightning rod. He's going to take the hits. And we know that all these things that have happened recently, Sankey is a catalyst, right? You look at how the leagues look. Sankey went out and got Texas and Oklahoma. So I don't know that it's his idea, but I do know that he has to speak for these things and on these things. And that sort of response tells me there is not confidence that this is the right thing to do. And again, I hope I'm reading that correctly. I hope I don't end up eating those words. But I think sometimes, public sentiment can work and can stop stupid things from happening. Hasn't happened much in college sports, that's for sure. But maybe this is going to be one of those rare examples.
We'll be on the lookout for allocations. Coming up next here on Robby and Rexrode, we'll get into the latest on the Titans draft strategy and how their past could potentially influence their future. Great piece at si.com on this topic. We'll get into that. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you, live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. We will have Bruce Feldman from The Athletic with us later in the show at 8:30. We'll get into the quarterbacks, some of the conversations he had at the NFL Combine a little bit later. Joe, real quickly, speaking of the NFL Combine, our friend Dayton Brugler has come out with his post-Combine mock draft, and we're getting close to the time of year, as you mentioned yesterday on the show, where the Beast comes out and he goes in depth on all these prospects. It is interesting to just kind of look at this mock draft. I won't read the whole thing and give the whole thing away, obviously, but he does project a trade that the Titans make at number 1 overall with the Giants. And I want to get your thoughts on the last part of this. He says, this is the only trade I'm projecting in this mock. Probably be the least surprising move if it comes to fruition. Packaging a pair of day 2 picks to move up from number 3 to number 1 likely will be enough to put Cam Ward in a Giants jersey. What do you make of the idea of the Giants moving up? And what's the price, if you're the Titans, that you're comfortable with moving from 1 to 3 at that point?
Yeah, it's interesting. He said a couple of day 2 picks.
He did.
Along with obviously trading 1 and 3. Man, I'd want more than that. I would want more than that. I mean, I'd love to, is it possible to get their first next year? Is that being too greedy?
You could start there with a conversation for sure.
Yeah. Like that's what I would be, because especially you think about that. I mean, the Giants absolutely have a great chance of sucking this year, no matter what they do at quarterback. So, that could be a real nice pick. That, and like, can you get their second and get like next year's 1? I mean, that's what I would. So second day picks now.
I mean, that could be a second round pick. So, I mean, there's value in that.
I guess that's second. That is second or third, though, right?
Correct.
That's second or third. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, if you get their second, you get their third. Oh man, that may end up being it. Two space jump, and by the time you get to this trade being made, the Titans may have signed Sam Darnold to be their quarterback. And so, like, obviously teams are less worried that the Titans are actually going to take their guy.
Yeah.
Take the quarterback. I'd like a little more than that if possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, is it a second and third round pick, what you're looking at that point? How popular is the idea of moving up to number 1? Are the Giants the only team that wants to move up to number 1? Because if so, Joe, I mean, that affects the price. Like, do the Raiders get involved in trying to move up to number 1? Another thing that Brugler talks about here, which is right in line with some other things we've discussed on the show today, which is, Ward is pretty firmly entrenched, and Shedeur Sanders did not help himself at the Combine. That's what Brugler talks about here, and says, some teams believe that Sanders is QB2 in this draft, while other teams view him as more of a day 2 type of prospect. So it is going to be really interesting to see like how people view the Sanders part of this, but how many people after the film, after the Combine, after meetings before the draft, just like fall in love with Cam Ward and want to move heaven and earth to get up to a position where they can draft it.
Yeah, I mean, he's clear QB1. Now remember, it's not that Shedeur didn't help himself; it's that he was always a fake prospect, according to Stilly.
Okay.
And this is just media finally being told by the football people is not good, that he's not good, because the only time media people can talk to the football people is when they're all in Indy together. They don't have their phone numbers or ever call or text them. It's just when they're in the same city, then all of a sudden the texts go through, I guess. But yeah, just a very interesting train of thought there. But yeah, look, we talked about it earlier with Shedeur. Is this misinformation? Is it people trying to throw people off the trail, or did he really like screw up some interviews? I mean, clearly some people are saying he screwed up some interviews. But Cam is the top prospect. And you just need, you need the Giants. I mean, that to me is the best scenario, because then you can get one of those top guys. You need them to absolutely be bought in on him and feel like they can't go without him. And just like the Titans are going through this free agency period, the Giants are too, right? I mean,
Yep.
Maybe Aaron Rodgers pulls makes them hallucinate and thinks that they should, put something in their coffee and they want to sign him. I mean, it's possible the Giants do something else, but yeah, it seems like if you're the Giants, you would think, that you got a real chance here to get this if you like him that much. And you're paying really close attention to, like, do the Titans legitimately like him a lot? I think the Titans want people to think that. Are the Titans actually warming up so much to Cam Ward that they might be like, you know what, screw it, man, we're just going to take this guy?
Let's head back to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Chad in Hendersonville. Chad, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, thank you, guys. Good morning. I got a question on your opinion on this Darnold thing. I guess the thing that's confusing to me is that Minnesota is going to let him go to free agent. And then as I kind of try to peel the onion back, my question is it potentially Darnold's camp that is forcing this free agent, that basically saying, I don't want to go on a trade, and anybody that's going to try to negotiate with me, we're going to basically put our hand up because we really want this thing to go to free agent? I mean, what kept Minnesota from not being able to get even a day 2 pick for him?
Yep. Thanks for the call, Chad. It's a good question. We threw that idea out there earlier of, is this as simple as Minnesota, quote unquote, trying to do right by their guy and letting him get to free agency? Because to me, Joe, like, there's still this conversation that's attached to Sam Darnold not having a franchise tag put on him. And everybody that's put that out there, I saw Rappaport put it out there last night. Rossini's put it out there of like, they're still going to try to get a deal done with him. It's like, okay, well, what kind of deal are they trying to get done with him, right? Like, are you signing Sam Darnold to a 3-year deal and paying him the type of money that other teams likely will pay him if he gets to the market? I got a tough time believing that when you've got J.J. McCarthy waiting in the wings. So this is a signal to me that Minnesota is going with McCarthy, and they think McCarthy's ready to be their starting quarterback next year. Now, as far as why they didn't tag Darnold and try to get something for him, that's a question that I would have as well if I'm a Minnesota fan, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a totally fair question. And, I think for people looking at Darnold, it's like, does all of this say more about Darnold or more about McCarthy? Like, if I'm the Vikings, I would like the comfort of, hey, you know what? Yeah, JJ looks great, and we think he's so good that he's going to take the job. But in the meantime, do you have to put everything on him right away this year when he is, less than a year removed from an ACL, or, he'll be a year removed when the season starts, or right before the season starts? Do you want to put everything on him? Do you believe in him that much? They haven't even been able to watch him like play in the last several months. Obviously, he was very impressive in the preseason. And I think as you saw the Michigan's run, I mean, he's a tremendous talent. There's no doubt. But it still seems like that's a bit of a stretch. So is this a little bit of a red flag? Like, yeah, there's a little bit of Darnold got propped up more than maybe you think last year.
615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll have more on the Titans and their draft process coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Tune in later today to 94.9 The Fan for Vanderbilt baseball as the Commodores host Evansville. Pregame beginning at 4:15. First pitch at 4:30. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at theGameNashville.com. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic will join us coming up at 8:30. Looking forward to that. Right now, taking your thoughts at 615-737-1025. Our phone number, 615-737-1025. Joe, we went through the piece from Albert Breer from SI.com earlier in the show, kind of highlighting the history of Brian Callahan, Mike Borgonzi, their drafts having the number 1 overall pick, and how that could influence what the Titans do moving forward. Now, in Callahan's case, it was Joe Burrow, and they knew pretty early in that process that Joe Burrow was going to be their number 1 overall pick. Borgonzi was with the Chiefs when they had the number 1 overall pick, and there were some quarterbacks available that they chose to pass on. They traded for Alex Smith that offseason. They drafted Eric Fisher at number 1, the tackle, and away from there they went. So they've done it in different ways. You know, how teams in different situations have handled the number 1 overall pick in years past, not necessarily an indicator of what the Titans are going to do here this year. But it was interesting from Albert Breer to get kind of some thoughts behind the scenes from Borgonzi and Callahan, and particularly from Borgonzi talking about, like, if you're drafting somebody that high, they better have some rare elite physical abilities. And he did not want to get too much into the quarterbacks when it came to those discussions, but did not have any problem naming Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter.
Yeah, that was interesting. Also, seems to me like, you know, Brian Callahan and he's pretty involved in the process. I don't know, it could be crazy. There was a time period of the day where he's not with those guys, so I guess that's a big deal. But I also enjoyed the fact that Callahan and Borgonzi have both like keywords that start with the letter C. That seemed to be an exciting point there for them. What are the words? Like connected, command, chemistry,
communication.
Yes. Communication.
Sure.
You know, so they like the C words. So there you go. Got that. Got that shared vision. Now, it was interesting. Certainly the 2 different ways of going about the similar situations, and in the examples given there, both of them worked, eventually. Now, with Kansas City, you go back to that draft where they decided, like they didn't like the quarterbacks at the top of the draft, and so they went and they traded for Alex Smith. I mean, I think there was a lot of, I'd imagine that Kansas City sports radio wasn't very favorable toward that at the time. Of course, no one could know that then, and they would go out with Alex Smith now, good quarterback, playoff team, consistently winning, go out and draft this kid out of Texas Tech, the system quarterback. What was the reaction to that at the time too, by the way? But it worked out great. And of course, it was a lot simpler for Callahan's path with Joe Burrow just blowing the room away. I mean, it sounds like Cam Ward is acquitting himself well. It sounds like he's doing a better job of helping himself in these rooms than Shedeur Sanders, but how much better?
So, Joe, an update on the quarterback situation as we sit here today at 8:20 on March the 4th. Sam Darnold looks like he's going to be out there and available. We've talked about the options with Cousins and Rodgers and those type of guys. Well, Ian Rappaport just went on the NFL Network, and he was talking about the Steelers, who continue to be one of the most fascinating teams to me in terms of what they're going to do at quarterback. And what Rappaport said was that based on people he's talked to, and he did say that some of them were Steelers executives, that one of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields is probably going to be their quarterback next year. And based on conversations that he's had, it looks like Justin Fields is going to be the favorite to be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers next season, Joe. So when you hear that, what do you think of that? If that's the way that Pittsburgh goes, do you think that's the right decision here? And what does that kind of tell you about the quarterback market if Pittsburgh is electing to, I guess, potentially bring back Justin Fields as their starting quarterback?
I guess maybe it means that Mike Tomlin and I are a little bit on the same page. But, I mean, if I'm a Steelers fan, I'm not excited about that. And I just don't see how that is going to do enough for you if you're the Steelers in the division they're in, with their defense clearly, taking some backward steps a little bit here. I just there's got to be, with that, there has to be a rookie in addition, right? Somewhere in here.
I would think. I mean, I don't know how you could go into next year saying Justin Fields is our guy. Like, he's unquestionably the starting quarterback all year.
Like, I don't have a problem picking him over Russ as long as then you have another option, and so maybe they're looking to trade up. Maybe they like one. Maybe they think Shador will fall. Maybe they think they like Tyler Shugg, whatever, Milroe. I don't know. Jackson Dart, apparently Jackson Dart helped himself in Indy. I don't know, but that can't be exciting for Steelers fans. It's good to me. It's good for the Titans if they want Darnold. If they want Darnold, if they're not interested in getting into that mix. Because if I'm Darnold, I'd probably be most just in terms of most players, right? Don't they look at the Steelers and say that's a stable, winning organization?
Sure, yeah.
That you'd like to be a part of. Did you see this text from Jeff? I have not seen this anywhere, so I don't know. But he's claiming that he read that the Niners might trade Purdy to the Titans for number one. And he says print media says they'll likely be on the market. I have not seen that. So we have not discussed it, Jeff, because I have not seen that anywhere.
I've seen the exact opposite of that they're working like mad to get an extension done with Purdy. I think somebody may have thrown the eye like a, you know how it is this time of year. Like, hey, could the 49ers throw Purdy in there and try to go get the number one overall pick? But I've not seen anything credible to like the Niners trying to get rid of him.
Yeah. So
their public comments have been the exact opposite of that.
Send me a link, Jeff.
Yeah, I would not say that one is probably on the scope of reality there. The Fields thing's interesting. You bring up Shador. Well, I brought up the Brugler mock draft. That's exactly where he's got Shador going. It's 21 to Pittsburgh. So that's a pretty precipitous fall from Sanders in terms of how this was a few weeks ago with a lot of these mock drafts. And again, it's a mock draft, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the way it's going to play out. But yeah, Brugler does have Shador falling all the way to 21 to Pittsburgh.
Well, falling. I mean, he's a TV prospect. How could a team want to take him in the first round? Is he? I thought he was going to be a UDFA.
Maybe so.
Steelers are making a huge reach there. If Shador's going to go in the first round, my goodness, they must really love Stephen A. Smith's commentary.
I'm interested to see if it shakes out that way. Like, to me, though, whether it's Shador or someone else, like if your plan is Justin Fields to be your starting quarterback next year, that has to be in tandem with you drafting another quarterback. I don't really see how it couldn't be.
Yeah, and if not, like Steelers fans, I mean, I'm going to need to check with Junie, see if he's okay.
Yeah,
Junie wellness check on Justin Fields. Yeah, look, I still have this glimmer of hope for Justin Fields because this was one of my draft takes. Like, Justin Fields is going to be amazing in the NFL. The Bears draft, I'm like, oh my God, the Bears actually did something smart. Didn't work out. I still have this glimmer of hope that take from long ago now can end up looking good and that he'll put it all together. There are times I watch him play, I'm like, man, there's just so much there, but I don't know. I mean, it's weird because they move on from him. They're winning, but they're not doing much on offense. They move on from him. Russ is better. Then at the end, Russ turns into a pumpkin, but it's just surprising, I guess, that it would be shocking if they're like, oh, all day it's just going back to Justin Fields and he's the guy.
By the way, just a quick thing to point out on the Brugler mock draft front before we get to Bruce Feldman. A notable omission from the first round of the NFL draft and his latest mock draft. No James Pierce Jr. in the first round.
Really interesting. Yeah. There was some, maybe we can even ask Bruce about this, but there was some talk about just, I think what I read, attitude would be the thing. So it's not like it's something he did that was hidden or something off the field, but attitude, I guess, would be. But my goodness, man, how bad he's a first round player. Like, how bad of an attitude are we talking about?
Yeah, I am not going on the field. I'm not doing it.
I hate you, Josh Heupel.
No, it's enough to not have him in the
I
first
smoke
round.
weed constantly.
Enough to not have him in the first round of Brugler's mock draft. We'll have Bruce Feldman from The Athletic joining us coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. We head to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Bruce Feldman, who does an outstanding job for The Athletic. Bruce, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning, guys. Good to be on with you.
Appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. So, Bruce, it's interesting. You know, a lot of conversation around here about quarterbacks for the Titans, which we'll get to in just a second. But, you know, the NFL Network put it out there that this is the fastest group of offensive linemen that the scouting combine has ever had. Titans have needed offensive linemen for what feels like forever at this point. So, based on what you heard at the combine and some of the conversations you've had, how do you view this year's crop of offensive linemen in the draft?
You know, I think it's better than probably people were making it out to be. There's obviously a lot of talk about the D-line group and this year, but I think you have some guys. I mean, there's some big athletic guys who I think tested better than a lot of people expected they would. So I think there'll be a bunch of guys probably in the middle of the first round that will be there that I think you'll see a run on that's pretty impressive. Obviously, we know this is not compared to last year a very good quarterback crop. I think that is a very underwhelming group. But on the O-line side, the running back side, the tight end side, I think it's a really good draft. You know, at least from that piece, it's just because you don't have the star power and the franchise quarterbacks there. I think a lot of people are just kind of underwhelmed by this group overall.
So speaking of those quarterbacks, Bruce, I saw in your report here, that, there are other guys who are possibly moving up. Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers threw the ball well, but obviously around here, everybody is concerned about, do the Titans take someone at 1? It seems like the consensus is that Cam Ward has distanced himself, has helped himself. More people like him. You talk to people, more people just thought there was a gap between Ward and Shedeur Sanders. There's also some talk out there about Sanders, I guess, not helping himself, in the interviews. I mean, what have you heard just about that aspect of this for Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah, there was one coordinator I talked to who had, his team met with Shedeur, and he said he thought he was sharp. And, I don't know if he turned off that many people. I just think, people are coming in probably going, all right, if we draft Shedeur, does it turn into a little bit of a circus? Because there was just so much of a social media push around him. There was constant, just because of what his father's college football program was like. So I think there's probably been some biases when he walks in the room for some people. But from a physical talent standpoint, all the NFL people I talked to who had a strong opinion one way or the other liked Cam Ward more than Shedeur Sanders. I think one thing that probably didn't help Shedeur is, people loved that he played in the bowl game, in the Alamo Bowl against BYU. He just played really badly in it. And I think there was some stuff on film that, some of the people who I talked to were like, oof, we saw him getting run down and retreating in the game against BYU. It was not a good night for him. And I think that was the last impression people had from him from film. There's still plenty of good things on tape that people see. But, look, I think it's pretty rare for a guy who could be drafted in the top 15 where they don't have, as a quarterback, where they don't have some perceptions. And there's certainly some of that with Caleb Williams last year, at the top of the draft. And I think there feels like there's always a quarterback who, this kind of chatter ends up starting out there, getting out there. Again, the people I talked to didn't have a problem with how Shedeur came across in the meetings. It was more of like, they just like Cam Ward better because they think he's just a more talented quarterback.
So Bruce, sticking with the quarterbacks there, it's a fairly common occurrence that, sometimes quarterbacks in the draft get taken in the first round, maybe more often, maybe a greater number of them than we think heading into a draft. So as you look at this year's draft, is there another quarterback beyond Sanders and Ward that you think could get into the first round? Is there more than one? How do you view that part of it heading into the draft?
I think the one guy who might sneak in somewhere would be Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. People love his toughness. He threw the ball pretty well in the workout on Saturday. Looked very comfortable. I think there's a bunch of people who I talk to like his temperament. There's mixed with him. There's other stuff where I think people are like, there's a lot of inconsistency there. Over a lot of time in his career, also like Cam Ward, there were big turnover issues. But I think people think he has at least has a chance to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. Tyler Shuck is really talented. He runs really well. He has really good size, really strong arm. And I don't know if this is a big knock. It's definitely a talking point around the draft world, is that he's going to be 26. But I think as much as anything else is that he has an injury history. But he's definitely a guy that people think has the talent to be a starting quarterback. Those would be the two guys who I think somebody could fall for and end up maybe moving back up into the first round to take him if you really, really need a quarterback. Again, I think Cam Ward will be a guy who will go in the top 5. Maybe Shador goes there. It depends. But then this is such a weak quarterback crop. I think people could talk themselves into the other two guys who generated some genuinely good buzz with what people saw from them in Indy.
So, Bruce, you wrote about James Pierce, obviously high interest around here from Tennessee. And then Texas A&M's Shamar Stewart, both testing extremely well. Stewart has not had the production. Pierce had production, but as you wrote, maturity. There's been a lot of talk about, why is James Pierce falling down draft boards? I think our colleague Dane Brewer doesn't have him in the first round, his latest mock. What did you hear on that front, and how would you compare those two in terms of their NFL potential?
Yeah, the similarities is they're tall, long guys who are really explosive. Pierce has better film. Stewart probably, people wonder where's the production. I mean, for a guy, he's more than 20 pounds bigger than James Pierce, and he is vertical jumping 40 inches and broad jumping almost 11 feet. I mean, those are insane numbers. He ran really well too, but 4.5 sacks over 37 games. I talked to multiple D-line coaches, and that came up a bunch where, yes, he's disruptive, but you still need him to make plays. With Pierce, there again, maturity was putting it probably kindly in some of the chatter you have with people in Indy. That it was just some stuff where I don't think he was getting the highest. There were some character concerns to put it mildly there, but he's a really good player. He's very talented, and I think especially at that position, there's plenty of guys in the NFL who've been kind of wild card personalities who bring a lot of value. That's just something. That's a huge need for teams. I wouldn't be surprised if he went in the first round. I also wouldn't be surprised if there are a few teams who said, we're going to pass on him just because we have some character concerns with him. But I think, again, if it's the maturity piece, you hope that he can, work through some of that, because he is a really, really good football player and he's exceptionally talented. And you saw the way he ran. I mean, that's still pretty rare to see a guy running in the mid 4.4s at 6'5" plus, and with some really good film on top of it.
So, Bruce, where do you come down on the Travis Hunter debate in terms of which position he'll be best at in the NFL? And in terms of receiver, how do you view this receiving class as a whole?
Yeah, I think he will end up being a longer term a defensive back and a corner, because from the people I talk to who like him a lot, they think he can be a great corner or a really good receiver, and it's just harder to find great corners. And he came across great in the meetings with teams that I talked to. They really, really liked him. I mean, I have a story in the piece on The Athletic, just of an anecdote of what he told one of the coaching staffs. I mean, they came away, they went in really liking him, and they loved him after that. The receiver class is not great like it was last year. I mean, you had obviously 4 big time receivers, the 2 LSU guys. You certainly had Marvin Harrison Jr. Roma Dunze last year. I think Tedero McMillan from Arizona has exceptional ball skills. He's 6'4" plus. He did not come across great in the meetings of the coaches I talked to. They were just kind of underwhelmed by him and kind of his vibe. But I don't think there were character concerns. They just didn't kind of love how he came across. But his film is really good. You know, there's questions about his speed. He's probably never going to run. He told some NFL teams he's not running at the combine. I don't think he's going to run at his pro day. So people are sitting there going, is he a 4.55 guy? Is he a 4.7 guy? He's probably in the maybe low 4.6s, but he has spectacular ability to make contested catches and make big plays. So I think from a talent standpoint, he's number one. A guy who helped himself probably as much as anybody overall in Indy was Matthew Golden. He ran blazing fast at sub 4.3. He is probably the best route runner in this draft. And he has really good ball skills too. He's just not very big, but I think he is a solid first round guy. After that, I mean, I think there's plenty of guys who are like, okay, we think he could be a strong contributor. But in terms of like the Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously Ladd McConkey had a fantastic, first rookie year last year for the Chargers. I mean, I think last year was a deeper group of really good receivers, but start with what you got from the big receiver from Arizona. I think he will be the guy who would probably be the first receiver taken, but I don't think this is what we had last year.
Yeah, and of course there was someone you talked to who was upset that Golden ran so well. Like, I was hoping he'd stay under the radar, but obviously that's not happening. So one of my favorite things Bruce does every year is the freaks list, and you knew that South Carolina safety Nick Emenwari was probably going to just do some ridiculous stuff, which he absolutely did. How good of a player? He ran a 4.38 with a 43 vertical. How good of a player do you think he can be in the NFL?
I think he's outstanding. I mean, this is a guy who's a former 3-star. He's 6'3", 220. That's great size. I mean, his 40 time was really good. And as somebody told me like a week or so before the combine that they were training, one of the receiver coaches was training guys with Emenwari, and he was like, he ran 4.35 last week. He's going to run great. I knew the jump numbers were going to be insane because, like you said, I had him in the freaks list last year. He was 11.6 in the broad jump, which is kind of mind blowing, the 43-inch vertical. But the other number that I think just kind of wows folks is he was tied for the fastest 10-yard split in Indy, 1.49, the fastest of anybody. And again, he's a big, big athlete. From the time he got to South Carolina, he made a lot of plays. One of the coaches I talked to, who was a DB coach in the NFL, he said he thought he was probably a late first, top of the second round guy going in. And this is a guy I know pretty well. And he kept on, we kind of had back and forth about him. I'd be really stunned if he's still around in the second round, because I think all the stuff we had talked about on the freaks list with Emenwari, and I feel like he's a guy, Joe, you obviously in prime SEC country and everything, like, I think it's surprising for an SEC guy to kind of come under the radar. I was just kind of like would shrug my shoulders that more people weren't getting it about him until Indy. And now I think everybody knows. There are Derwin James comparisons, as a box safety. I think he's probably even more than that. And obviously Derwin James had a ton of hype, and buzz around him. I don't know if he's got as much range as Kyle Hamilton with the Ravens, who's, even taller, runs great like Emenwari. I mean, again, one of the coaches I talked to, who's a DB coach, was like, because I brought up Kyle Hamilton, he goes, I don't know if I'd go there yet, but I think he's the guy that it seems like more and more people are falling in love with.
Well, Bruce, really good information. Appreciate so much you taking time to be with us this morning, and we'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll react to what Bruce had to say coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Tune in to 94.9 The Fan tonight for Vanderbilt men's basketball. Commodores taking on Arkansas at Memorial Gym. 9 o'clock tip-off, late night. The pregame show starting at 8:30. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. Appreciate Bruce Feldman for being with us in the last segment. Joe, interesting stuff on the James Pierce front. I mean, apparently there's just some heavy concerns on James Pierce and the character issues that are continuing to come out. And as we talked about before Bruce came on, enough to get him completely out of the first round of Dane Brugler's mock draft there. Did we lose Joe?
I mean, that was a bit of an eye popper. What? You got me?
You're back.
Hello.
Yep, you're
hello?
all good.
Sorry. Yeah, that was a bit of an eye popper. You know, even like Bruce saying basically that what he wrote was, putting it mildly. And again, it goes with, I said it earlier in the show, but there's been some reporting along the lines of, this is what I believe happened. Okay. And I think that this gets into a really interesting topic. I've always been fascinated by this topic, which is college coaching staffs and the level of honesty that they deliver to NFL staffs when they ask them about players. Because there have been, I know, talked to people in the past where it's like, some programs are known for, they fluff all their guys and they just sort of say, hey, great, because they want their guys to be drafted high and they would never, they want to be loyal. They don't want to say anything to them. Well, but the thing is, there's also a reason to be honest with NFL people, and so, different programs have different reputations, different coaches within programs too, right? Like sometimes you may just have a real frank talker who's like, yeah, actually, I didn't like this kid that much. But it seems to me that Pierce was hard to deal with last year. So again, it's better than better than
some criminal problem off the field or something. Yeah,
exactly. Some criminal problem, something like that. But that seems to be, clearly, well, I shouldn't say clearly, but it seems that this is information teams are getting from Tennessee. I mean, I can't. I mean, that's where you're going to – it's very important to these pro teams that they have people on in these college programs that will tell them the real deal. Give me the real deal with this kid, okay? And it sounds like some people gave the real deal on Pierce, and it was not great. And it was, he said maturity, but, I mean, character concern, that's a significant – that's a significant phrase, character concern. So
you know what's going to happen to him, right? He's going to make it all the way to the end of the first round, and he's going to get drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. And he's going to have 11 sacks his rookie years in Philadelphia.
Good God. Seriously. Or the Chiefs will get him.
Remember when all the stuff with Jalen Carter, and then the minute Philadelphia drafted Jalen Carter, I was like, oh, God, no. And here he is, just blowing everything up out there.
Yes, Chiefs or Eagles will get him at the end of the first round. He'll be a star immediately. I mean, he's a first-round talent. And, again, we're talking about a guy who was talked about as number one pick. Of course, so was Will Levis. But first-round talent, so how much does it actually hurt him, It's going to be – so I imagine there'll probably be more talk about this because it's a really – because you're right. This is exactly how sometimes teams that shouldn't be able to get a player like that do.
Gonna be
of course it would be.
Welcome to Philadelphia, James. Hope you have a good time. That does it for us today.
The all-SEC defense.
It is. That does it for us today here on the program. Chasing Big Joe up next. You're listening to